All right, Therese, speak at 10 o'clock.
No.
Yeah. It's 12:30, we gotta go do policy. Yes, you do.
Here's a headpiece, here, earpiece.
That's not mine. Is that yours?
Let me get my line.
No, really? Wonderful. No, I mean, he ran into
Fall rate.
Trump's gonna feel that he's up here.
He's gonna be late. Well, since they're not on Capitol Hill,
I can do
they're not here.
It's against the law.
It's gone.
Probably like already automated, set up, reset the bank payment.
In the calendar, it says TBD, it says it's white there, it says TBD.
Wait for hearing.
But whatever day that is, gets called. They better just leave now, just come to and vacate.
Just can't get enough.
Okay.
What about the, is there a close rate on
It's not that.
That's right. Sounds
We're good to go.
This is all. Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, I sent them all, I looked at them. My whole
Yeah, we gotta change that way about the Edison.
No, it's one panel. CFL ball.
Yeah.
Share it.
You can't even, if you go buy a regular, you find a regular way. It's all CFL.
Yeah.
Or unless you buy that, unless you buy the vintage. You gotta go to Rob.
It's got balls for the next 35 years. But Home Depot and Strohsneider's are not happy. We're trying not to do
Whoa, wait a second.
Yeah, hey Dave, said
The other shit you would give AP if they had two people here.
This is a Maryland
No,
Sunday
did I do
event.
that? I don't get that shit.
That's true.
This is Maryland Sunday event. You're gonna get
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but wait a second. Let me hear that shudder.
Yeah.
It's gonna get a nice long
So you
page.
have to have Sundays for this?
We had like 8 front pages yesterday.
I'm gonna get, I'm gonna get Canon.
okay, I'm good.
That's coming in February.
That's 2 hours.
This is Charlie, you see this?
I brought my settings in yesterday. I put them on loud.
Yeah.
So,
Was that Lipton?
so what's it called? August. The reenactment.
Excuse me.
Right now, I want to see you late at the press conference.
They want Pelosi.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That it was.
Yeah, it was Pelosi's office. That they could have.
He has a question.
Imagine if we go for surprise.
Yeah, I think he has a question.
Your, my phone's last.
Yeah, you're not sure today.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a reenactment.
All right. Hey, Jeff, can I get a mic check, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sound effective?
You get how they do the layout now. With the markers. So you like how many
Keep talking.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
I know,
8, 9,
like, you guys are taking my first
11, 12, 13,
Just okay.
Please, yeah, sure.
Okay.
No, you're not.
Yeah, it'd be like, you know, when you go. You know, we're Southwest border, the D. That counts as you. You know, like, you gotta go, you know,
Yeah, come here.
Actually, I was here in the green room.
One for him.
All right, I'm 14.
Really about 1 minute, guys.
Okay, thank you. I think I said 4:14.
No.
Okay.
2 seconds.
All right.
Yeah, Sonny. Anybody?
like a stepchild, feed them.
That's right. You were told, it's about a minute.
It works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What it works is
Yeah.
No, he has the loudest camera on camera.
Oh my God.
Shoot a Frank, let's hear it. Turn it down. Do you want to hear it quiet? Yeah, put it quiet. No, it's still too loud. You're gonna have to leave.
We're working on that new system they have over at outside.
I saw you, is that the blink you were making earlier?
That's a camera inside that balloon.
I didn't get a good load, but.
Are you the only one that helps?
Huh?
Are you the only one that helps?
Say it again.
Are you the only one that
No.
helps?
I kind of is. There's 2 or 3. I was lit over the eye in that. He was in the guard stuff. Yeah. She was always there. She left like 3 months ago. Oh, really? She was just. That's up.
Face down.
Yes, 6.
Can you hear? Just check it. I changed the cable.
It's just going in higher. You just gotta go and do. That's just a light That's just a light ass stuff.
By himself.
No, I don't have one. I'm so happy right there. He's coming.
You don't have anything?
No, not today.
Oh, wait a second.
He's got it.
He got bounced at the last minute.
Wait, keep your headphones.
Yeah, I got
Apparently in New York, they'll check theirs. It's covered.
What's wrong? Really?
He said there's plenty of room there, right?
Talk about it. Talk about it, I guess.
Like, hey, can you do?
Here we go.
Good afternoon. I've now had a chance to review in detail the notes of the call between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine, as well as the legal opinion drafted by the Department of Justice in an effort to prevent the whistleblower complaint from coming to our committee. And I have to say that I'm shocked by both. The notes of the call reflect a conversation far more damning than I or many others had imagined. It is shocking at another level that the White House would release these notes and felt that somehow this would help the president's case or cause. Because what those notes reflect is a classic Mafia-like shakedown of a foreign leader. They reflect a Ukrainian president who was desperate for U.S. support, for military support to help that country in a hot war with Putin's Russia, a country that is still occupied by irregular Russian forces, and in which people face a very dangerous and continuing and destabilizing action by their aggressive neighbor. And at the same time, a president of the United States who immediately after the Ukraine president expresses the need for further weapons, tells the Ukraine president that he has a favor to ask. The president communicates to his Ukrainian counterpart that the United States has done a lot for Ukraine. We've done an awful lot for Ukraine, more than the Europeans or anyone else has done for Ukraine, but there's not much reciprocity here. This is how a mafia boss talks. What have you done for us? We've done so much for you, but there's not much reciprocity. I have a favor I want to ask you. And what is that favor? Of course, the favor is to investigate his political rival, to investigate the Bidens. And it's clear that the Ukraine president understands exactly what is expected of him and is making every effort to mollify the president. What adds another layer of depravity to this conversation is the fact that the President of the United States then invokes the Attorney General of the United States, as well as his personal lawyer, as emissaries, in the case of the Attorney General, as an official head of a U.S. department, the Department of Justice, that he says will be part and parcel of this. Now, I know the Attorney General is denying involvement in this, but nonetheless, you can see why the Department of Justice would want this transcript never to see the light of day. You can see why they have worked so hard to deprive our committee of the whistleblower complaint. And in fact, the opinion by the Justice Department is startling in its own regard, because in that opinion, the Department of Justice advances the absurd claim that the Director of National Intelligence has no responsibility over efforts to prevent foreign interference in our elections. Well, that will come as news, or at least it should, to the Director of National Intelligence, who is charged, among other things, with detecting foreign interference in our elections and with reporting to Congress about foreign interference in our elections. But it is apparently the view of this Justice Department that the Director has no jurisdiction in this area. And it is a sad fact that the Director of National Intelligence would agree to be bound by that view, that the Director of National Intelligence would adopt the view that he had no jurisdiction over an effort to seek foreign interference in our election. That will be the subject of our hearing with the Director tomorrow. What's more, that Department of Justice opinion doesn't even preclude the Director from providing that complaint to our committee, and yet he has withheld it in violation of the law. But the fact that the President of the United States would invoke the Attorney General sends a further message to the Ukrainian president that this is not just me asking, this is not just Rudy Giuliani asking, this is the United States government asking, and we plan to effectuate that through the Department of Justice. Whether those steps have taken place yet or not, or whether those steps have now been prevented by the whistleblower complaint and all that has followed from that revelation. So here we have the President of the United States engaged in a shakedown of a foreign president, a President of the United States, even as he is withholding vital military support to an ally, asking a favor of that ally to investigate his opponent. And just by way of background here, so we know what's at stake, in 1994, we tried to get Ukraine to give up nuclear weapons it inherited from the Soviet Union. They were reluctant to do so because those weapons might be a guarantee against aggression by their neighbor, that is, by the Soviet Union. But we and our allies persuaded the Ukrainians nonetheless to give up those weapons, and we assured Ukraine that we would help guarantee its territorial integrity. Well, Russia would then invade Ukraine, and over the years since that invasion, the United States has provided, albeit not enough, military support to Ukraine. But the most recent support to Ukraine was held up by this president, hundreds of millions of dollars, for reasons that the president would not and the secretaries were not able to communicate even to leaders of their own party, like Mitch McConnell, who said yesterday that he couldn't find out why this aid was being withheld. Well, I think we know why the aid was being withheld, notwithstanding the president's now conflicting explanations. Well, it was because we wanted them to investigate corruption. No, it was because we wanted Europe to give them more money, even though Europe has given them even more than we have. I think we know why the president was withholding that assistance. But regardless, Ukraine understood exactly what was being asked of it. Ukraine understood exactly what they needed from the United States, and that a president of the United States would interfere with our national security, would interfere with the national security of our ally, and do so for the illicit purpose of trying to advance his election campaign, having already sought foreign help in his first presidential campaign, would now abuse the power of his office yet again, this time to seek the help of another nation in his presidential campaign, is the most fundamental betrayal of his oath of office. And I'd be happy to respond to your questions, but one final point about the whistleblower. We still don't have the complaint. Now that we have the Department of Justice opinion, I think it's telling that they have released that and yet not released the Inspector General's legal analysis that takes issue with it. This is, again, Bill Barr's Justice Department trying to put out a misleading spin, in this case in the form of the department's opinion. But nevertheless, that complaint needs to be provided to our committee. It needs to be provided in its entirety. That whistleblower needs to be given instructions about how to come to our committee, and that whistleblower needs to be given the complete freedom to report any allegations of wrongdoing that have come to that whistleblower's attention. We will not brook any kind of interference, given how pervasive this cover-up apparently is. Now I'll be happy to answer your questions. Yes.
Can you, the White House says that this call summary proves that there was no quid pro quo because the withheld military aid never even came up in the conversation. What's your response to that?
My response is the president of Ukraine brought up his country's need for military assistance, and immediately thereafter, the president of the United States said, I have a favor I want to ask of you, and would not let the subject go. There was only one message that that president of Ukraine got from that call, and that was, this is what I need. I know what you need. Like any mafia boss, the president didn't need to say, that's a nice country you have. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, because that was clear from the conversation. There is no quid pro quo necessary to betray your country or your oath of office, even though many read this as a quid pro quo. I'm not concerned whether it is a quid pro quo or not. Ukraine understood what this president wanted. He made it abundantly clear. He made it redundantly clear. He had his emissaries making it clear. And Ukraine knew what it needed to do if it wanted to get military assistance, and that is help the President of the United States violate his oath of office.
So what specifically do you see as the impeachable offense here?
Well, I think in its most naked form, and this is what our inquiry is going to look into, the President has now admitted the notes of this call, and we don't even know if these are the complete notes of that call, indicate the President of the United States shaking down a foreign leader, essentially undermining the national security of this country for a personal political gain, and one that violates his oath of office. So it is very powerful evidence of that kind of potential impeachable offense. But we want to get the full facts before the American people, and we also want to make sure we take corrective action. And I want to thank the whistleblower. We still don't know whether this is the subject of the whistleblower's complaint, but I think this single courageous individual may have had the effect of forcing the White House to provide Ukraine with this funding, knowing that these matters were going to come to light. But this whistleblower has already had a tremendous impact in exposing wrongdoing of the President of the United States. and helping protect our national security in a way that his or her boss was unwilling to do. And by that, I mean the director as well as the President of the United States.
You resisted calls for impeachment for some time. Yesterday, you came out in support of what the Speaker announced. After seeing what you saw in this transcript, is there any doubt in your mind that House Democrats will move to impeach this president?
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. I think what we have learned, what has been admitted, and now what we see in writing is about as damning as you can imagine. It will be a decision for us when we conclude our investigative work whether to bring this or other matters in the form of articles to a vote. And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But no one should have any illusions about the seriousness of what is already uncontested. And that is the President of the United States has betrayed his oath of office and sacrificed our national security in doing so. And that, I think, is quintessentially what the framers were concerned about. I think it's quintessentially what the framers thought was the sum and substance of what might warrant a president's removal from office. So I don't want to understate the significance of what's already been revealed, but I also don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Yes.
By tomorrow morning, do you expect to hear from the whistleblower as early as this week? And what more do you expect to learn from him or her, or from the full complaint, that you can't already glean from the memo of this interaction between President Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart?
Well, I certainly hope to hear from the whistleblower this week, and perhaps as soon as tomorrow after the director testifies. But that whistleblower is trying to make sure that that whistleblower is not subject to any further retaliation. And I say further because the president has already retaliated against him or her, retaliated by suggesting that the whistleblower is disloyal to our country. Maybe they're representing some other country, that they're a partisan hack, that they have some hidden bias. So there's already been retaliation by the president. And I would have thought and I would have hoped that the Director of National Intelligence would have spoken out publicly in defense of his employee or contractor. That is someone reliant on the director to protect them. So I don't know whether it will happen tomorrow or not. I can tell you the whistleblower, I think, is eager to come and meet with our committee. This is already a month overdue, at least a month overdue. And we are determined to make sure that that whistleblower has that opportunity. What's more, that no one is sitting next to them trying to put a gag on what they can say.
Thank you, Chairman. I know the election specifically is not your foremost concern, but if I'm not mistaken, today is 131 days until February 3rd. That's the Iowa caucus. So I'm curious from your perspective, what does the timeline look like? How aggressively do you and your colleagues need to move so that you're not interfering with the presidential election? You don't get too late into next year's cycle. Is that a concern?
I don't know what the timeline will look like, except that we all feel a sense of urgency here. The Inspector General, and this is, by the way, not contested in the Department of Justice sham legal opinion, no one has taken issue with the fact that this is urgent. Now, DOJ comes up with this completely contorted rationalization that the Director of National Intelligence has no responsibility over foreign interference in our elections, which is completely bogus. But nevertheless, they don't take issue with the urgency here. And I'm not talking about the statutory definition, the fact that this needs immediate attention. So we need to get to the bottom of this whistleblower complaint ASAP. In terms of ultimately how long it's going to take us to develop the full facts, I don't know. I would not have imagined things would have moved as swiftly as they did over the last week. But the cascade of admissions by the president, by Rudy Giuliani, who now gives the bizarre explanation that the State Department was involved in urging him to undertake these activities on behalf of the president to investigate his rival. If he's being truthful there, and obviously that's a huge if, then there's a whole separate scandal involving the State Department, which, by the way, there probably is, given the circumstances of the firing of the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. But I can't tell you what the timeline looks like. Yes.
Are you expecting this complaint by the start of your hearing tomorrow? And can you talk a little bit more about what happens if you don't receive it? What other questions do you have for the DNI?
Well, you know, I can only say that we've heard nothing from the White House. And frankly, the fact that this is a decision the White House is making is a scandal. If indeed the president is the subject of the whistleblower complaint, the idea that the president can control the subject of a complaint, can control whether that complaint ever gets to its intended recipient, that is the Congress, is a scandal. But nonetheless, we've heard nothing except through the media about White House intentions. In terms of the director's intentions, I guess we'll find out tomorrow. I have to imagine he's not eager to come before our committee, having still withheld the complaint. Now that it's clear the Department of Justice didn't even say that he was prohibited from giving it to us, that he is making that decision on his own initiative. I mean, I find it troubling enough that he would seek an opinion that can be used as a pretext to keep this from Congress. And the director understood the contents, if it indeed involves this conversation, and just how scandalous and what a betrayal of the president's oath of office that those notes, not transcript, but notes reflect. I can't imagine he's going to want to come to our committee without having provided that complaint. But frankly, I can't imagine that the director would have gone along with a legal interpretation that says that he has no responsibility over preventing a foreign nation from interfering in our election.
Will you hold him in contempt if that complaint does not reach you?
I'm not going to discuss what repercussions will follow if there's continuing obstruction of Congress and continuing violation of the law. We'll make that decision when it comes. Thank you very much.
What happens with your committee now once you get this?